Yesterday was the first day of Set 9 dropping onto the live servers, and I have not posted a video yesterday, as you may have noticed, even though we usually do our daily uploads around this time of the year, which is a false statement because this is the first time I've been doing daily uploads, so, I mean, whatever. I mean, that's the precedent, right? We're gonna try to set the precedent for that. But, listen, I did not drop a video yesterday because I streamed for 18.5 hours as soon as the set dropped, and I ended the day at Gold 2. And you might sound like, Gold 2, fuck, you're so shit at the game. But, I mean, this is for people who are watching in the future who don't understand that Gold 2 is, like, the top 200 of NA at the moment. So, at the time of recording this video, so, suck my dick. Anyways, let me say this, though. Obviously, in order to climb, you need to also VOD review. You cannot just keep grinding games because your fundamentals will only take you so far. And personally speaking, as some of you may notice near the end of my stream, I was hitting a roadblock. Because I just could not figure out what I was doing wrong, how I was pushing the game was different, and I was too narrow-minded. Like, by preparing just by yourself, you can only go so far. Your scope is only so much, right? You gotta watch other players, see how they play, and that's how you find lines that you never would have thought of. No matter who you are, there are lines that you never would have thought of, okay? Something about this motion is very funny. It's like, you know? Anyways, ew, diving into the pussy. Whoa. But anyways, before I got sidetracked, I finally had some time to VOD review some of the top of NA, and I have been humbled. I thought all the prep work I did would solve everything. I would know every single line in and out. I thought I was ready. But just because you've seen all the lines doesn't mean they come to you whenever you're playing in the game. It's like boxing. Throw your jabs, you practice your 1-2s, whatever, the uppercuts if you will, and then you get into the boxing ring. As soon as that bell starts, you just forget everything. You just forget everything. And that's what I was experiencing yesterday while playing on the ladder. So, in today's video, I have been humbled by none other than rank 1 NA, Dish Soap, who just goes to show you that, like, hey, if you think you're playing TFT in the best way possible, you're not. Let's get on to today's video. Okay, so here we go. We are inside of the very first official ever Set 9 VOD review that isn't on the PBE. And we are watching none other than, like we said in the intro, Dish Soap, the #1 NA player. So, starting off, already seeing that we are given Scuttle Puddle, Dreaming Pool, and the Summit as our options, rather. I was going to say choices, but I stumbled on my words. And out of all these, I think it's pretty obvious that Scuttle Puddle is sort of the way to go. Dreaming Pool is not very fun to play in, and the Summit is okay, but getting a Champion Duplicator can end up with some very awkward and weird win conditions with a lot of 3-star 3 costs and a lot of 3-star 4 costs. Unfortunately, the Summit does end up getting picked, even though everybody else chose Scuttle Puddle, and we are inside of Targon. So, starting off the game, right off the bat, we are given a Maokai, and this is honestly a nice change of pace. I like that we don't have this weird APM check at the very beginning with the starting carousels. I like that they did this to change that mechanic, because I think there was a lot of complaints about how a lot of people didn't like the first carousel being this weird APM check. So, given right off the bat a Darius as well as an Akshan. Now, this opens up 2 lines for us in particular, Deadeye being the very obvious one with the Jhin, but also Darius potential reroll with Darius reroll inside of Noxus. If we get a lot of Samirs, a lot of Cassiopeias, that is definitely a line that we can consider. Obviously, even though I just said that, we didn't get any of those in the shop, and we are given a Bastion Deadeye frontline, or rather, Bastion frontline, Deadeye backline. So, already we're off to a pretty decent start in terms of units that we're looking for. Not a lot of upgrades. Our itemization is kind of shit with the Hodge Slam, but I mean, it's fine as it is. And we're given a cut above Hustler and Cybernetic Leech. Now, like we know, it's been in the news, augment stats are going away. They're going away. But they haven't gone away yet. And because they haven't gone away yet, what we can do is we can look up the stats, because, I mean, we might as well use the stats to figure things out, like, while we can. The stats, I believe they go away starting, I believe, next month, which is going to be pretty sad, but, I mean, it is what it is. We'll see how TFT is, but until then, I love stats. I love looking at stats. They're my favorite thing to look at. So definitely really cool to be looking into these and seeing how everything is going. We're going to be looking at Platinum and above. Gold and above, Platinum and above, I think both are fine. I think Gold and above should be okay. Right now, Gold and above should probably be around High Diamond / Masters and above, I believe. So I think we're actually going to go into Plat, because I think most Masters and above players, or I would assume probably GM and above, are probably in Platinum Plus by this point. So let's all talk about Platinum Plus stats, and let's talk about it. Cut Above is one of the best augments in the game at the moment. Definitely, this is almost an auto take if you have a strong AD holder, but we can obviously look at the other options that we have as well, Hustler and Cybernetic Leech, where, honestly, I don't know why I moved this window away. We can look real quick. Hustler is a 4.4, and Leech, I believe, is like a 4.7. Yeah, I mean, understandably, in the early game, you don't have that many components. It obviously gets better as you go and progress through the game. So, whenever we're given our augments, right, want to make sure that we re-roll the other two options that we have available to us before we end up picking whatever augment we wanted. This is the most efficient way of choosing our augments, and we're giving Gargantuan Resolve and Challenger Crest. Now, Challenger Crest can be good. It's not stats-wise as strong as a cut above, but it's still a really, really strong choice to take because Challenger, as we've seen in the current meta, it's a very viable option to just run vertical challengers or maybe even like a Samira Aurelia reroll and then pushing into 6 challengers into the mid to late game, capping out with Yasuo 2 and Kai'Sa 2. Really, really strong line, a lot of tempo in the early game, but we don't have any challengers right now on our board, so this actually isn't the best choice to be taking. So it's again, cut above or Gargantuan Resolve. Gargantuan Resolve is great if you have a really, really strong Titans holder. I believe, though, the average is a 4.62 at 2-1. Meaning that if you're going to take this augment, you better have like a 2-star 2-cost, maybe like a Warwick, for example, who would really like to have that Titans and maybe even a carry Warwick augment that could play around it. So from this spot, we're going to be taking a cut above. But I mean, again, it's a very obvious choice from this spot. I mean, even without stats, I think we can all agree that a cut above was definitely the way to go here. We do have the Deadeye pair in the background, and we're given a Hodge and Deathblade Slam onto our Akshan because he is our strongest carry at the moment. Funny enough, though, the thing about Deadeye is that Jin 2 is way too strong of a 1-cost unit right now. If you hit a Jin 2, that should be your primary AD carry for a very long time. This thing, usually in the early game, when you think about Jin 1 versus Jin 2, it's like Jin 2 is actually pumping out like 3k, 5k damage a fight, which is some very high numbers. And as you can see, within the top echelon of the ladder, even against the opponents that we're playing into, a lot of people are picking up Jins. Jin 2, if you can get it in the early game, it's a free win streak, really. It's one of the most consistent carries within the early game. And even though we hit the Jin 2 later than the Akshan, obviously we're not going to sell the Akshan for the Jin, but just because, you know, we happen to find Jin 2 so early, we wouldn't have another Deadeye, right? But as soon as we find another Deadeye, it would make a lot of sense, actually, for us to sell this Akshan and then put the items onto Jin instead and have Jin be our item holder for our Deadeye backline. Now, we are in an Ionia plus Deadeye backline, which is very interesting to see here. Usually when you're playing around Deadeye, the sort of common line, at least during the PBE, was Brawlers plus Deadeye. And as we can see here, Deersoap, he's actually playing, I believe he's actually at 4x speed. Whoops, my bad. But as we can see, Deersoap is molding, I guess. I don't know what's going on. But he has three Ionia with 2 Deadeye, which I think in his eyes is probably stronger than playing around a Bruiser frontline. And it's very interesting to see because it does make a lot of sense. If we're playing around a Jin carry, I mean, we're playing around the Akshan at the moment, but again, as soon as we hit the 2 Deadeye, we already talked about it. As soon as we get that second Deadeye, this Jin 2 gets the Ionia buff, which I believe is plus 30% AD for Jin. Really strong carry throughout the mid game, and I really like seeing that this Ionia line exists in the mid game because I definitely was not doing this myself. I was definitely playing more just Bruisers plus Deadeye or Bastion plus Deadeye backline, a very simple front to back, but seeing him make use of both of Jin's traits is really, really nice to see, and definitely something that not a lot of people are taking advantage of, at least within the first day of the set dropping. So here we're given a Runan Slam, and quite honestly, Runans is probably not the way to go here. You probably don't want to be slamming Runans throughout most of the game. Why is this the case? Runans used to be a really good slam, but nowadays it's a little worse. Nowadays it's a little worse because the itemizations on AD carries are a little more strict, if you will. Like, you're given a bow, you want that to be Ginsu's. You want Ginsu's on your Zeri. You want Ginsu's on your Aphelios. You want Ginsu's on... I already said Zeri. But nonetheless, there are a bunch of the premier AD carries like Ginsu's. Actually, if you're even flexing, you want Ginsu's because Kai'Sa can use Ginsu's and so can Azir. So, Ginsu's is one of the premier bow items, so you don't really see Runans being slammed because at the end of the day, if you have a Ginsu slam, that means that you need some sort of damage. So that's either, in this case, Deathblade, and some form of healing, which in this case is Hodge. And Hodge is surprisingly pretty strong in the current meta. A lot of really great Hodge holders. A lot of really great Hodge holders in the current meta. We're seeing it being used on literally anybody. And if you high roll Idealism, you get to play it, which, if you don't know, gives 18% bonus damage for any unit that is holding a Hodge. Now, we're in our 3-2 augment choices. We're given Tiny Titanus, Unified Resistance, and Cybernetic Leech. Unified Resistance is probably the most obvious choice here because Unified Resistance is one of those augments it's always good. You can always have a 3 front, 3 back. It plays into the standard idea of what TFT is. The stats it provides is also really nice. 25, 25 armor and MR to your entire team, basically, if you're unifying the resistance, if you will. So Unified Resistance. Really good shit here, right? Clearly, the Unified Resistance is the choice to take. Why would we take anything else? We are so strong at the moment. We don't need the extra health from Tiny Titans. We're playing... You don't need Cybernetic Leech yet. It's still not that late into the game. We're not getting a lot of value out of Cybers. So, clearly, Unified Resistance here, right? Clearly, Unified Resistance. We even reroll the Pandora's items. What do we take from the spot, right? It has to be Unified. It has to be Unified. Come on. It's so much stats. It's so many free stats. One of the best silver augments in the game. Surely... Alright. Let's talk about it. Why did Dish Soap take Tiny Titans in this spot? Let's go back and rewind a little bit. This is his current board. Action 1. Aphelios 2. And you might be going, whoa, maybe the stats are, you know, favoring Tiny Titans instead. Well, let's look at it real quick. Right? Tiny Titans averages a 4.432. Actually, pretty good. 4.4. Pretty solid. But what about Unified Resistance? Unified Resistance averages a 3.79. We should have taken Unified Resistance every single time, right? The stats say so. No. We shouldn't. Not in this scenario. We should not be taking Unified Resistance. Why is that the case? You might go, oh, well, maybe it's because we're level 5 and we can't put 3 in the front, 3 in the back, so that doesn't make sense. But then, you know, if we go level 6, that solves that issue. So, what's the deal? The idea is this. We are contested heavily for Deadeye. Very heavily for Deadeye. As you saw before in the early game, a lot of people were picking up Jins. A lot of people are playing Deadeye. It's one of the most premier AD lines to be playing around. I mean, Aphelios is just a very solid top 4 board. It's really nice to see. But earlier, Dish Soap had actually scouted the lobby and noticed that there were a lot of Deadeye players. Meaning that if we wanted to make sure that we hit our Deadeye units, we'd actually have to be able to go to level 8. That is the big difference. This set, Econ, is different now. It's slightly different now. You have to think a lot more critically about your position because level 7, level 8 are very different now. Level 8 was sort of a given, if you will. It was very rare where you'd have to be rolling on 7 to stabilize your board during set 8 and then go... Yeah, and then go level 8, right? It was very rare to do that, and it was only in the high-end echelon of challenger players where if you could low roll like that, that's the place where it would happen. Otherwise, almost in every single game, 99.99% of players would play in, level 8 was almost a given. Now level 8 is way harder to hit. And what we're seeing right now at the top end of the ladder is that a lot of people are staying level 7, and a lot of people are actually ending their games at level 7, and if you check the win rates of people being level 7 and level 8 and which level did they end the game on, people who ended level 8 significantly higher. Way higher percentage. Like your chances of winning the game if you manage to get level 8, way higher. Almost way higher than if you were to end the game at level 7. And we'll see this being the gap between the two increases as you go up the ladder. This is because top challenger players know that level 7 is when you can roll and try to find your 4 costs. You won't have good odds to find your 2-star 4 costs, but you can find your 4 costs. And so what we'll see a lot of challenger players do is that they will go to level 7 and roll pretty heavily. We're seeing actually a lot of people rolling on 3-2 as well at level 6 because they need to maintain tempo, because they need to make sure that they're not falling too far behind and losing too much HP during stage 3. So level 7, we're seeing these roll downs, right? And people are finding their Zeris, their Aphelioses. And if they high roll, they find their 2-stars. And they even find units like Yasuo, Kaisa, Azir, right? A lot of these units that are really strong, and even though they only have 1 copy, maybe 2, rarely, sometimes, but often enough, sometimes they're a 2-star version, right? It becomes a problem where it's like, hey man, you're also level 7, but now there's so many other people who are contesting for your unit that if everybody else is looking for your 4-star, or rather your 4 cost, you're going to have a really bad time rolling at 7 to try to find it. So what Dish Soap said is, fuck it, I'm going to go level 8 instead, and then make sure my odds are high enough that I'm basically guaranteed it, so that if everybody else is holding 1 copy of it, I could still go to level 8 and try to find my copies as well. As we see here, though, he does end up rolling here on 7, even though the game plan is to go to level 8, because his board is too weak to sustain himself throughout the stage 4 lobbies, where he's going to be fighting people with 4 costs on their boards now, with 4 cost carries, 1-star 4 costs such as Aphelios, such as Kaisa, such as Zeri. And it's going to be a lot harder for him to maintain tempo, especially in the later half of stage 4. So he needs to roll a little bit here, try to find some level of direction, see if like, hey, maybe I'll find my Aphelios too, maybe not, maybe I'll find, you know, a Zeri or whatever, and maybe try to flex into it. So we'll talk about the game plan and how things are going on his board, but first let's talk about his 4-2 augments. Unleashed Arcana, level up, and hedge fund. Definitely not hedge fund. Don't, it's not hedge fund. Hedge fund is Windfall, but worse. Windfall was already sort of one of those prismatic augments that you took if you're like, maybe I'll take it, maybe I won't, maybe I need it, maybe I don't. It's not hedge fund in the spot. Level up, definitely not. We just rolled away a lot of our money. Arcana doesn't make sense. We're not playing any AP. Reroll all three. So reroll 1, 2, and 3. See what we got here. Fawn, Cybernetic Leech, and roll the dice. So the Fawn is sort of always a safe option, but we need to ask yourselves, or rather ask yourselves, when do you take Fawn? When are you willing to give up prismatic power if you will, or prismatic augment slot, that's a better way to phrase it, for a Fawn? The only time it's acceptable, really, it's two times when it's acceptable. You don't have any other choice. You just mort dog your shit, and it's a Fawn. Better than nothing, right? But the times when it's beneficial for you to take a Fawn is when you have a situation where if you're to tech in an extra unit, you complete a very strong synergy, or maybe that one extra unit will really spike your board. For example, let's put it in extreme words. Let's say you have a Rise 3 on your bench. You can't seem to fit it in. I don't know how the fuck that's the case. But if you take a Fawn and you throw that in, now you win the game. I mean, obviously, you just throw the Rise 3 in. It's a terrible example, but you get the idea, right? Use extremities to figure out the more niche case scenarios. But let's say, for example, I'll give you a better option. Actually, fuck this. I'll give you a better metaphor, okay? Fuck you, by the way. If you're like, oh, that was a shit metaphor, I mean, lick my ass. I don't give a fuck. So, I mean, you're the one watching this. You don't have to be... All right, sorry. Anyways, I'm getting distracted. Listen. For example, let's say you're at 6 out of 7 Shurima. And if you get that Fawn, now you don't have to go level 8. You can just chill at 7, roll for your 4 costs, chill out, and then maybe go level 8 and play a 9th unit at level 8, right? Makes a lot more sense to take a Fawn there. I don't know why I didn't start with that metaphor first. Makes a lot more sense. But, moving on. Cybernetic Leech. Never bad. Never bad. But on our board right now, we don't really want to be spreading items. We want to be spreading components whenever we're giving cybers, not items, right? So, I mean, it's a little difficult to take from this spot. It's not bad. But we're also given Roll the Dice, gain a Rascal's Glove, which equals 2 Radiant items every round. Roll the Dice is sort of a weird one. It's weird because Radiant items, I believe Mordog said this in I believe it wasn't an interview, it was in a stream like a while back. But I think the balance team values Radiant items at about 30 to 40 gold. So you're giving this one unit 80 gold worth of power, if you will. So it's very strong if you roll the right items. But if you roll the wrong ones, it can be a bit of a whiz, right? So Roll the Dice is a little more dicey, no pun intended, but we could also take Cybers here, Fawn here, both are fine. In our current spot right now, I'm going to see if he chose his board here. Clearly, if we take Fawn, nothing matters too hard, really. Like, again, we're trying to play into Deadeye, right? We're trying to play into the Aphelios, trying to play into the Freljord, right? We have the Lysandra, the Deadeyes on our board. That's the direction that we're trying to face here, right? So, we're given maybe, definitely not Cybers, right? By the way, it's definitely not Cybers. We have 3 complete items, it's not Cybers. So, it's either Fawn, or let's roll the dice. But like we said before, roll the dice. Or rather, sorry, Fawn, there's no vertical we're trying to play. There's no unit that we want to put in, like, super, super badly. So it must be roll the dice, and that's what we see digital takes. So we take roll the dice here, and let's talk about the board direction, too. This is important, actually, because this is the part where I kind of went like, oh, shit, you know? Because what are we looking for? Let's think about it, right? What are we looking for? And then what do we do if we miss? That's the big one. Top challenger players don't miss. Does that make sense? Like, at a certain point, you can miss, right? Like, let's say, like, your entire board, like, you've invested 80 gold into your board, and you just need your 2-star 4 cost, that 1 4 cost you need, that's a miss. But in this scenario, challenger players don't miss. What do I mean by this scenario? This is a scenario where you still have opportunity to flex. There's still a chance to flex into different lines here. Now, what are the different lines that we have, right? Again, potentially we can play around Deadeyes. That's our main plan. We want to play around the Aphelios. We do have the Runan Slam. A little awkward in my opinion, but it's fine. But also, you know, triple item Aphelios can't go wrong. Plus the Ash, plus the Freljord, right? But what do we do if we miss? Who are the other options that we have at our disposal? We have options like Zeri, and we have options like Yasuo. These are the 2 other premier AD carries that are 4 costs, right? So we have the Yasuo sitting on our bench. How do we pivot into these other scenarios? That's what you guys need to learn. Because this is something that even like people like myself struggle with. At least at the beginning of the set. We learn, we get better. But until then, we struggle with this too. Where sometimes it's a little difficult because in this scenario you might think, okay, it's just Zeri, it's just Aphelios, it's one of the two. But don't sleep on Yasuo. Don't forget about your third option. You have to consider every single option that's available to you. And in this spot, is there a trait that you notice that's on our board that might let us play into Yasuo instead of the Aphelios? Ionia. So what we'll do here is that even though we don't have any challengers, if we run into a Kai'Sa, we run into maybe a couple of more Ionia units, we could potentially play into Yasuo carry with 6 Ionia inside of the vertical, which is a very interesting vertical to play. It's a very less common vertical to play because Ionia Challengers was like an okay board during the PvE, but it was never anyone's like favorite board to run. It was never anybody's first choice. So as we'll see here, we're sitting at 15 gold and we are going to start pivoting our board. We see the Kai'Sa, we see the failure. This is, by the way, a difficult decision to make. Do you pick the Sejuani here and keep trying to play for the Aphelios? Or do you pick up the Kai'Sa here and you play for the Yasuo? Think about it. Which one would you take from this spot? What would you do? The correct answer is Yasuo. Why is it the correct answer? Why do we actually know it's the correct answer? Even though we're sort of given 2 very different choices here. Why is that the correct answer? 2 reasons. First off, we already have the 4 costs we're looking for. We have the Yasuo, we have a Kai'Sa. Also, we have way more Ionia units given from this shop specifically compared to our other line, right? We have the 1 Sejuani versus a Jet Set who's an Ionia. Sorry, Jet is a different game, right? Kai'Sa for the Challenger, and we have Warwick for Challenger. We have way more lines and way more options available to us here in this specific moment. And quite honestly, you could call this shop a high roll. That's the craziest thing. This shop is actually a high roll because he has every unit he needs for this Ionia Challenger line. But you can only think of this as a high roll if you see this line. So here, as we can see, I think he hesitates for a bit. It's a little difficult. His entire bench is cluttered. He's still thinking about the Jhin. He's still thinking about whatever else he's got available to him. But as we'll slowly see, he eventually figures out the board, 6 Ionia, and he's chilling. Another thing to note here is that I think Dish Soap actually doesn't prefer playing around Challenger like too early, because the reason why is at level 7, and this is something niche about this board, a little bit of a nuance if you will, but with this board in particular, you don't want to pick up Kai'Sa too early. You can pick it up, but how do you fit it? How do you fit it? At least in this scenario, how do you fit it? You have a Jhin 2, who's your primary carry, who's going to be stronger than your Yasuo 1. Remember what we said before at the very beginning. Jhin 2 is a very, very strong unit at the moment. So, playing around the Jhin 2, it's really great for your mid game, and actually throughout stage 4, it's kind of acceptable. It's definitely better to keep this Jhin 2 on your board rather than this Yasuo 1 because it will pump out more damage. But until we get more items for our Yasuo, this is sort of going to be our main 80 item holder. Or at least maybe until we hit Yasuo 2, you know? We'll reevaluate when the time comes. So as we can see, he actually skips the Kai'Sa, which is crazy. I don't think I would have skipped the Kai'Sa here. He holds the J4 over the Kai'Sa, which is very interesting. I don't have an answer for that, though, to be completely honest. But maybe his read is that J4, as a standalone unit with no strategist and no Demacia, is still a very strong enough unit that it's better to hold for potential J4 2 rather than holding for that potential Kai'Sa 2 that you might be playing on later on. Now, you could also argue that he doesn't have the items that he needs for potentially playing around Kai'Sa. I mean, maybe you can move around the Rascal's Glove if you find another set 2, but it's a little difficult to do. So maybe he thinks that the time investment is too deep, so that's why he doesn't do it. But nonetheless, now we're sitting on the J4 pair on bench, 38 gold, and we are at 101 HP. Ladies and gentlemen, we're at 101 fucking HP. This man has lost, well, now 90, but he's lost 40 HP this entire game. He has been very efficient with the way that he uses his money and the way that he plays his lines, where even though, yes, Deadeye was the original decision here, fuck it. Even though, yes, it's still on our board, it's just because it's our strongest board, we are going to be playing into Ionia Challengers instead, and we're going to cap out around Yasuo 2, Kai'Sa 2. Now, don't forget the Realm. Don't forget the sauce. Or what the fuck's that dude say? Don't forget the Bev, never, 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 dude. Like, listen, the Aki way, dude, Dish Soap doesn't forget this shit. He doesn't forget that we're right now playing in what is the Targon Realm, right? Don't forget the Realm. The Realm we're playing in is the Duplicator Realm. You get a Duplicator at the end of at the beginning of every stage, rather, sorry. I mean, you know, half glass full, half glass empty, right? But we get a duplicator at the beginning or at the beginning of every stage, right? So, sure, we get the duplicator, right? What does this mean? What are we going to use with this duplicator, right? The duplicator is important because this gives us opportunity to be flexing around other outs. So, the sort of main out, if you will, whenever we're playing around Ionia challengers is Yasuo 2, Kai'Sa 2. Who else can be our out? Who else could possibly carry us out in Ionias? Just take a look at the board. The answer is Karma 3. Karma 3 is a potential out that we can play for. And as you can see here, we do actually have a potential JG guard breaker. Obviously, we're going to itemize our Yasuo first because our Yasuo is way more likely to be our win condition than our Karma 3 is. But we do have stuff like guard breaker. We do have stuff like Hodge. We have stuff like Morello's, which is available to us. And in this case, it's probably Hodge Yasuo, Morello Karma. Sorry, I just had a Domino's pizza, so I'm a little gassy right now. I don't think that's TMI. Shut up. We're adults here. Anyways. So, as we can see here, he hits the J4 too, but ends up not playing into... Oh, no, he does end up playing into it. My apologies. He does end up playing into it. And actually, who does he take out for it? Actually, let's see what he takes out here. Let's rewind a little bit. And he takes... Oh, no, he's just had a naked J4 in his board this entire time. Okay, that explains why he picked up the J4 from earlier. I'm a moron. So, cool. Hits the J4-2 here in one shot, which is a little ridiculous. And then we are given the J4-2. He did sell a unit. He did sell one of the Ionian units. I believe he sold his set so that he can move the Rascal's Glove onto probably J4. It would have been Kai'Sa if he had a Kai'Sa 2, but he does not. So here we're still 6 Ionia, 2 Challenger, but eventually we do want to cap out playing around 4 Challengers instead with Kai'Sa 2. But again, it's very difficult to play around, and we don't want to really be selling these Jins on our bench because Jin 2 is fine. He's fine as a secondary carry, but also because it just makes our board way weaker just to hold out one Kai'Sa. So we're going to be skipping on the Kai'Sa there. Or did we skip it? Man, this commentary is all over the place, huh? Oh, no, he ends up getting it. Okay, good shit. Good job, Dish Soap. So he ends up picking up the Kai'Sa here. Good fucking shit. And then we can start thinking about, different ways that we can play around. Because, again, it's a little difficult to itemize this Kai'Sa too, which is why the priority is not so high on it. Because we have nothing but 80 items. One of these may be going on the Yasuo. It's unlikely to say, but, I mean, at this point, probably not. And we're just playing for maybe, whatever it is. It's very likely, though, instead that for our secondary AD carry, we are going to be playing for the Aphelios 2 instead. Because, I mean, that's why we're holding it on our bench. But because we do have Deadeye on our board, we might be playing into it. Now, you may notice he sold the Ashe 2 here for the Senna with the Shojin, which is a really good read to say that, like, hey, like, it's not always about traits. This Shojin Senna will probably provide more value onto our board than if we were to play and keep this Ashe 2 on our board. Sure, we lose Deadeyes, but we get a Senna with Shojin in the end. Much, much stronger for us, right? Although, obviously, if we do end up hitting this Jin 3, or rather, sorry, if we hit up another Jin 2, we will... Hold on a minute. Sorry. The gameplay is going faster than I can talk. Here's the thing. He also didn't sell the Jin because if he sold the Jin earlier, like, we're given less of a chance to maybe itemize our Yasuo, if you will, right? We took the Senna, right? We took the Senna from the carousel from before, but had we not taken the Senna, we would have gotten a third item on our Yasuo. Anyways, we wouldn't have to sold the Jin. But now, we got the Senna with the Shojin, so then we sold the Jin, so that we can put the items onto the Yasuo. Boom! I'm so smart. Anyways, going into here, finalizing the board. Now, even though we still have a Kai'Sa pair in our shop here, and it would be nice to have that as our out, we do actually also find the Karma 3. And let's not, dip our toes in too many buckets. I don't know what the phrase is. Listen, we don't need to go for the Kai'Sa 3 anymore, or Kai'Sa 2 anymore. We have the Karma 3. And that's good enough for our AP secondary carry, plus Aphelios 2 for our tertiary carry. And quite honestly, maybe even the Karma is a tertiary carry at this point, because she doesn't have a damage item. But nonetheless, 6 Ionia, Karma 3. This is a very interesting way to approach the game, if you will. At the end of it all, you could be like, oh, well, we never really dropped out of Deadeye. I mean, like, we kind of did. Like, instead of playing around the Deadeye unit that we wanted to, and rather try to play around the primary carry that we wanted to, we had to flex into a different line, play around the Ionia, and then slowly find ourselves back into this Deadeye line that eventually we were able to still play out into the very end. So, here we are with our final board. It looks a bit janky, but it's not. 6 Ionia vertical is surprisingly pretty strong. And as we'll see here, Dishloaf has already secured his top 2. He secured his top 2, and now we're just kind of chilling in this spot. And quite honestly, we're winning our fights now. And we've been winning our fights. So, what is the game plan? Maybe we go 9, right? Look at the opponent's board. Maybe we look for any forecasts that they're holding for, right? We look at their bench. There's nothing serious, though. Like, he has 1 extra Azir. He's 5 off. But he's holding a duplicator, and he has, like, 50 gold. So, maybe this guy, if he didn't die here, I think the guy thought he wouldn't die. As we can see here, if we go back a little bit. This cutscene is so long. here on the he has 50 gold at the end on his bench, right? He probably thought he would survive one more round and then send it for the Azir 3. And if that was the case, Dish Soap would have actually had to make sure that he would also roll that instead of going 9 to deny him from hitting Azir 3. But nonetheless, that's the end of the game. Dish Soap probably actually would have lost this one if this other guy actually survived this one last round, but he took perfect damage, and unfortunately, that is the end of the game for Tad, and Dish Soap goes home with a dub. I hope you guys learned something. Take care, and happy climbing.